And away we go. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome all to Coffee Talk. It's time once again for Coffee Talk Live, where we will be having some discussion about what is going on in the world today, share a little bit of clips from the news, have a little bit of dialogue with those of you who are able to join us for the live portion. And if you're listening somewhere else and you wanted to join the live portion, you can find us Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, on Coffee Talk and Prepper University, at Coffee Talk Live at Prepper University. You can find me on fistfulofradio.com. You can find me on at Coffee Talk Chat on X and Rumble. And that's Coffee Talk 2, the number 2 on Rumble. But I cannot see comments from Rumble. I can only see comments from YouTube. And so I'll go ahead and say hello to some of the people that have chimed in thus far on YouTube. I see Jimmy is here. Brian is here. Helter is here. Dragon. Legends. New York Patriot. Bob Smith have chosen to say hello today. Hope everybody's doing all right. And hello to everyone else who was watching that didn't want to say anything, and that's okay. There's no obligation. D-Lo is here. And I do have Miss Kitty in the background. Miss Kitty is sleeping in the chair behind me today, keeping me company as we get ready to jump off. You all saw the thumbnail and you know where that's going. A few points before I get to that. We will be talking about the drones, obviously. And Armored wants to know, why are the Democrats so mute? They got nothing to say right now because they're embarrassed. Unless they're like insane, like Selena Gomez. And we showed her yesterday in her meltdown. Unless they're crazy, they're keeping their mouths shut right now. And here's Peter from New Zealand. Peter is listening. So listening from New Zealand. Glad you could make it today. We'll go ahead and open up the first news story here and explain this, because this is the breaking news top of the hour. And this is a Washington Post article. Just for clarification. Just for clarification. We're getting there. Come on. And I got an orange notification for connectivity issues, so hopefully I'm not having a problem being heard. Trump White House reverses course and rescinds the freeze on federal grants. This happened apparently this morning or Wednesday evening. The White House's budget office on Wednesday rescinded an order freezing federal grants, according to a copy of a new memo obtained by the Washington Post after the administration's move to halt spending earlier this week provoked backlash. In a memo dated Wednesday, today, and distributed to federal agencies, Matthew Vaith, acting director of the White House Office of Management and Budget, states that OMB Memorandum M2513 is rescinded. That order issued Monday instructed federal agencies to temporarily pause all activities related to obligations or disbursement of all federal financial assistance. The original White House order freezing federal grants, which became public Monday, caused mass chaos. That's because people wanted their check. And confusion across Washington, appearing to imperil government programs that fund schools, provide housing, and ensure low-income Americans have access to health care. They're not going to not get their health care if they're below the poverty scale. We've talked about that a million times. They don't pay for anything, trust me. Oh, man. States reported issues accessing funds under Medicaid, and even as of Wednesday, public housing authorities reported being locked out of their funding portal. While House spokeswoman Carolyn Leavitt said Tuesday that assistance for individuals would not be affected. The Trump administration withdrew the order a day after a federal judge in Washington, D.C. temporarily halted its implementation until February 3rd, allowing for public health advocates, nonprofits, and businesses represented by the left-leaning group Democracy Forward more time to challenge the directive legally. Separately, roughly 24 state attorneys general filed their own lawsuits against the administration Tuesday, arguing the pause to federal spending had harmed their citizens. Well, they don't know if it harmed anybody yet because they only just tried to do it. Yeah, Tuck says mass chaos. Indeed, I know. And Peter says there's a problem with the audio. So hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully you can hear me. And Jane says, I'm happily not laid off from the VA hospital. Okay. Okay. Where are we here as I catch up? Mass chaos indeed. No, there's no mass chaos. There is no mass chaos. And Brian says there's a stream on atomic candy. There shouldn't be. There shouldn't be anything. I don't know what's going on. Its Restream is a mess. Restream is a mess. It should only be casting to Coffee Talk, Prepper University, and Rumble. That's the only place this should be visible. Coffee Talk, Prepper University, and Rumble. But anyway, so it's not basically it's been temporarily halted until February 3rd, which is right around the corner. There were some portal issues with accessing funds for stuff that should have still been available. That's nothing that can't be fixed. It's not that big of a deal. And I don't disagree with them trying to shut it down. I don't disagree with them trying to shut it down. It's not a bad idea. They should shut it down because they need to stop a lot of it. And Ladybug says, I do sound like I'm in a tunnel. The audio is off somehow. It figures. And there's Puck. He says, what are they doing with all those undelivered condoms for Gaza? I have no idea. I heard that, though. $50 million worth of condoms going into Gaza. What the hell do they need condoms for? That's the kind of stuff that Trump is trying to shut down. That's the kind of stuff that he's trying to move America away from, is wasting all of that money and wasting all of that funding on things that don't make any damn sense. There's no reason. Someone explain to me why Gaza needs $50 million worth of condoms. Someone explain that to me. What are they going to do with them? Well, I know what they're going to do with them, but I mean, what do they need them from us for? Why are we providing them with condoms? That just doesn't make sense. Why are we providing anybody with anything? Why are we paying for everything all across the globe all the time? Why is it always us? Why is it always the United States paying for freaking everything? Speaking of paying for everything, let's may as well jump to Mexico. And this is an AFP article. Trump crackdown spurs migrants to seek refuge in Mexico. Yeah, so they traveled all the way up from all over the world, landed somewhere in South America, and traveled with the assistance of Catholic Charities and satellite offices from the Biden administration, by the way, all the way up through South and Central America to get to our border to be told, basically, forget it. So now they want to hang out in Mexico. Let's see how they like it. Let's see how they like it. After U.S. President Donald Trump dashed her hopes of gaining asylum in the United States, Ariane Dominguez joined hundreds of other migrants seeking refuge in Mexico instead. Well, what did they do? Talk to the one person from South America in this crowd? Everybody there is obviously either African or Middle Eastern, except for the guy in the vest who's giving directions. Everyone in these photo shots is African or Middle Eastern. Where did they find the one woman from, like, Venezuela or something? Where the hell is she? Is this supposed to be her? The one in the Tupac shirt? Did I miss something? Did I miss something? The 24-year-old Cuban, she's Cuban, arrived in Mexico less than 2 weeks before Trump took office on January 20th and almost immediately halted access to an app introduced by his predecessor Biden to help process claims for entering the United States. How does she get to Mexico from Cuba? Why doesn't she just take a raft across to Florida like everybody else? I was in shock. Dominguez said, I thought about my family in Cuba who were hoping I could get to the United States. Then I had to think about plan B. You never had plan B. There was no plan B. There was plan A all the way, A for America, and a big fat check, and free housing, and free clothing, and free medical, and whatever the hell else that our tax dollars are paying for. The alternative she decided on was to stay in Mexico and obtain refuge status. Well, you don't have a choice. If you really did sneak over there from from Cuba, Cuba's going to be pretty harsh on you when you return. She can't go back. She went to an office of the Mexican Commission for Refugee Assistance, or COMAR, in a Mexico City suburb that is busy dealing with migrants seeking asylum in the Latin American nation. Yeah, see how they like it for a while. Venezuelans, Cubans, and other foreigners fleeing poverty. Oh, you show me where the Venezuelans and Cubans are in these photos. They always say that. They always want to make it sound like everybody who's coming across the border is from like Mexico or Nicaragua or something. They're not. They're from everywhere else. They're coming from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, primarily. Long gone are the days of Mexicans trying to cross the border looking for work. Seriously. And these news articles always want to make it sound like that's what it is. And I forget who it is. There's another celebrity who had a meltdown. I should have copied the video clip. Having a meltdown on her Instagram or whatever the hell, talking about, because she apparently is from South America. And she was like, you don't want Mexicans in your country? We don't want you either. So anytime you want to go on vacation to Mexico, just forget it, because we don't want you either. And it's like, there's a big difference between an American tourist visiting a country for a few days and bringing money to that country because you're spending on your vacation, and then going home and illegally sneaking into a country and refusing to leave and insulting that country at every opportunity and living off taxpayers. There's a huge difference. Does anybody know who that was? I can't remember who it was. I don't recognize the actress anyways. I ought to look for that meltdown and share that on an upcoming video. The media and everybody always wants you to think it's just a bunch of Mexicans coming across the border looking to either put a roof on your house or pick corn. That's not who these people are. This is not 1960. Things have changed. Things have changed. In 2024, Mexico granted refuge to more than 26,800 foreigners, according to official figures. Okay, that's cute. While we had that many people a day crossing our border in some instances, I think in October, November, we were hitting those numbers, right? So they had 26,800 foreigners they allowed to seek asylum. Meanwhile, Biden lets 11 million people in here. Incredible. Armin says, draw the lines already, make people choose and separate accordingly. And Puck says, NGOs and some well-known American charities were assisting invaders. They should be investigated. Yes. Jericho says, South Americans aren't Mexicans. I wonder if anyone knows Mexico and South America are totally separate territories. Mexico is part of North America. Yeah, you don't start getting into South America until you get as far south as Cozumel in Mexico, right? And it's a big difference. But yeah, you would be right. You would be right. Wow. What are you going to do? And Puck says professional moochers. Yes. And I'll put this up from all people. real quick if you want to read that. But that just strikes me. And all the people they're interviewing, again, this person is from Cuba. This is another person from Cuba. I'm just reading ahead. 60-year-old from Cuba, 43-year-old from Cuba, 12-year-old. Or this other person said they had to leave their wife and daughter behind in Cuba. Yeah, I bet you did. I bet you did. But then when I look at the photographs, once again, I don't see any Cubans. I don't see any Central Americans. I don't see any South Americans. Where are they? Somebody point them out, because I missed something. I must have I must have missed something. But this is what the press would have people believe. But most people are not smart enough to discern it. Even reading this article, if anybody read past the title in the first sentence, which most people won't, they'll glaze over even these photographs and question it. The only person there that looks like they could be from South or Central America is the guy giving directions, the guy wearing the vest back there. Incredible. But what are you going to do? I'll say it. I said it before. I'll say it again. People are not that smart. People don't sit there and ask questions like, why are we giving $50 million worth of condoms to Gaza? What the hell's up with that? Someone explain it, please. Or a better question. Now, this one came up, and I read this story the other day because they're blaming Trump for the egg shortage now. Okay. And they had some points to make about it. And this is what I talked about. I did a short about this the other day, and people got pissed off at me, told me I didn't know what I was talking about. But here's the Independent. White House blames Biden for killing 100 million chickens, refuses to admit Trump broken vow on costly eggs. Okay. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, or Levitt, is it Levitt? On Tuesday blamed soaring egg prices in the U.S. on former President Biden's administration for killing 100 million chickens to stem the spread of bird flu. Both the disease and culling has impacted egg prices, but President Trump vowed in November he would immediately reduce prices. As far as the egg shortage, the Biden administration and the Department of Agriculture directed the mass killing of more than 100 million chickens, which has led to a lack of chicken supply in the country. Levitt said when pressed about the ongoing high price of eggs, despite Trump's promise, therefore a lack of egg supply is leading to the shortage. Trump promised at a press conference 2 months ago, when I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one. But now Vice President J.D. Vance has since said the administration needs a bit more time. Of course they do. That was foolish of Trump to promise that, because he can't materialize chickens and eggs. And Puck says the Independent are wankers. Well, you see that they're left leaning here. But bottom line, that was a mistake on Trump's part to make a promise like that. He cannot materialize eggs. All he can do is stop additional cullings. That's all he can do. All right. All he can do is make it so, okay, you got bird flu, suck it up. Like we used to. As I pointed out yesterday, we were talking about that they're doing it at duck farms right now by the hundreds of thousands. We read that article yesterday afternoon that if you're going to keep killing them all, there won't be eggs, and chicken price. The chicken meat prices are going to go up, as well as egg prices. Egg prices are very expensive right now. We're getting to where the organic eggs are cheaper because they don't have to kill chickens. Or mostly they don't, unless they're forced to by the government. But growing up, I don't remember this ever happening. I've only seen these huge flocks being exterminated under government orders within the last decade. 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. I don't remember them doing this. Do you guys remember anything like that? Who remembers them doing that growing up? Who remembers seeing in the news or hearing in the news or reading the newspaper when they still made newspapers about massive bird populations being exterminated under the orders of the federal government from the FDA or the USDA or whoever? Monkey says, broken vow. Trump's only been in for 9 days now, and egg prices don't change that rapidly. Also, the previous administration was ordering the FDA to kill them before Biden left. So, literally jumping on him for not immediately doing that's really it. Yeah. Yeah. It's not going to happen overnight. All that he can do is walk back the modern practice of exterminating these large populations of birds. How many stories did we read last year of massive populations being wiped out, including turkeys? And right before Thanksgiving, millions of them. It's ridiculous. But yeah, this is what you're concerned about: chickens. Chickens. Who remembers that episode of the Real Ghostbusters, the after-school cartoon? And the guy summoned a demon, and the demon wanted to know what he wanted done, and he said he wanted the demon to get rid of all the chickens because he hated chickens. And the demon's like, "No, really, what do you want?" "I want you to get rid of all the chickens. I hates chickens." That was a weird episode. And James is here. Glad you could make it today. Well, what do they think he's supposed to do? Materialize more chickens? Think Trump has a magic wand? Oh, I know. Why don't we import them from Canada? That'll be cheap. Have them shipped over here from the UK. I mean, again, Trump probably shouldn't have said it like that. Maybe he should have worded it a little differently. "I'll work on it from day one." Sounds a little bit more plausible, because then you can turn around and make accusations like this and look like an idiot. But I'm not mad about that. It's not something that he can fix immediately, because there are shortages in these industrial farms right now because of things that the previous administration allowed and even enforced. And we talked about it all off and on last year. And like I said, even yesterday, because they're culling huge populations of ducks right now because of suspected bird flu. Oh my God, not the birds have had the flu before, but in the last 10 years, suddenly it's a huge problem. Let's just wipe them all out. Brilliant. Brilliant. Also brilliant. Oh, Restream. I hope it opens up this article without too much of a hitch. AP News article coming up here. Anytime, Restream. Anytime. Anytime. AP article, and you've all seen this in the news in the last couple of days. Trump order aims to end federal support for gender transitions for those under 19, which I agree. I don't think that the federal government should be funding anything like that. I don't think that your tax dollars should be going to anything like this. President Donald Trump on Tuesday signed an executive order aiming at cutting federal support for gender transitions for people under the age of 19. His latest move to roll back protections for transmogrified people across the country. Quote, "It is the policy of the United States that it will not fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support the so-called transition of a child from one sex to another, and it will rigorously enforce all laws that prohibit or limit these destructive and life-altering procedures," the order says. And we've talked about this a lot off and on. Most people who go through these transitions become manically depressed. Many of them end up ending themselves as a result, or wanting to change back, which you can't. They, quote, detransition, which cannot effectively be done because the procedures, if they're followed all the way through, cannot be reversed. So you're basically ruined for life, and it can't be fixed. So that is I agree with that completely. The order directs that federally run insurance programs, including TRICARE for military families and Medicaid, exclude coverage for such care, and calls on the Department of Justice to vigorously pursue litigation and legislation to oppose said practices. Medicaid programs in some states cover gender affirming care. The new order suggests the practice could end and targets hospitals and universities that receive federal money and provide the care. So much for your Hippocratic oath. I shall do no harm, yet you'll take like a 5-year-old and slice him to bits. It's disgusting. All people said that Ghostbusters episode was predictive programming. Could be. They did get the chickens back. The Ghostbusters rescued them by the end of the episode. Peter says they've been doing this to the food supply for 50 years or more. Remember Foot and Mouth and Mad Cow. Yeah, I remember the Mad Cow incident. They killed a lot of cattle. They killed a lot of cattle. Brian says the poor chickens people are evil. And Tuck says he may make something happen fast because chickens breed fairly fast. Yeah, they do breed fast and they do develop quickly. And Peter says Elon has been nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. Has he? Has he? So again, major medical groups such as the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics support access to care. Think about that. Pediatrics support that care. Young people who persistently identify as a gender that differs from their sex assigned at birth. And I love how they say assigned at birth, like you pulled a card. Like you pulled a card. Like you flipped a coin. Like you were hired to be born a human being, and they said, this is your job, here's this card. Oh, I guess you're a boy. That's not how any of that works. Another thing that I think is really interesting is a lot of the so-called transmogrified people that I've seen interviews with, or that I had talked to way back in the day when I did those interviews, somebody pressured them into it. They didn't start off thinking that way. They were encouraged. Quote, it is deeply unfair to play politics with people's lives and strip transgender young people, their families, and their providers of the freedom to make necessary healthcare decisions, according to Human Rights Campaign President Kelly Robinson. You've been making it political for the last decade. You have. Someone else wants to make it political and it doesn't flow in your direction. Now you're upset about it. In addition to that, he wants to pull that out of the military. He doesn't want to support it in the military anymore. He wants to walk it back and get away from that. That is Trump, and the Trump administration wants to walk that back. And I see that the Nostalgic Pod Blast is here. Nostalgic Pod Blast has an interesting nostalgia channel if anybody wants to check it out. That the military, that your tax dollars should not be paying for these people, should not be supporting it. Should not be supporting it. Your tax dollars shouldn't be paying for it. And that he's in big trouble now because he's going to lose. I don't have the article pulled up, but I read it this morning. He's going to lose up to 14,000 people in the military who identify as transmogrified. 14,000. Oh, no, not that. Not 14,000. Half of which are probably faking it for benefits. We read those stories last year, too, and not just in the United States, in other countries. Who remembers the story from Spain where they're having a problem with their military because a lot of their men are claiming to be transgender lesbians because the pay's better if they're female. Work in the system. So imagine, okay, we got half the people faking it and half the people have some other problem, want to wear makeup and acrylic nails on duty. And Trump's like, we're not paying for that. We're not paying for your surgeries. We don't want that here. This is the military. It's embarrassing. All these other countries are laughing at us. Okay. But, oh, God, it could affect 14,000 of them. How many people are in the, you have a clue? Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, not counting the Space Force. Okay. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. It's upwards of 1.3 million. So 1 million or 1,300,000 plus in the armed services actively, reserves, whatever you got. Okay. 14,000 is a drop in the bucket. Go away. Bye. You can be easily replaced. A lot of people don't want to join the military because of that. Peter says the audio and video is out of sync. Yeah, figures. As soon as I'm able to, I'll be getting out of Restream. And John is here, fellow cat shepherd, he says. Yeah, you see Miss Kitty is asleep in the chair behind me, having a good time. Having a good time. But, and Puck says, I wonder if those high-ranking transformers in the military are getting removed. They are. They are being removed. They are being removed. Maybe this will put us back in sync. And this is the tie-in with the thumbnail. And it's a big I told you so moment, because this is exactly what I said it was. National Review article. New Jersey drones were FAA authorized. The White House confirms after months of speculation. Gotcha. This is what I had hypothesized the entire time. That they were ours. And everybody lied about it. Everybody is upset. FAA said they don't know nothing about it. Oh, what drones? Military, we don't know nothing. The governor, what the hell is going on? Where are these drones coming from? Tell me something. Biden, oh, well, the FAA is investigating it. We don't know. Turns out they all lied. The only person who told the truth was Trump, who, when he was asked about it months ago, said, they're very likely ours. I don't know why they don't just tell the truth. Well, guess what? They are. Article reads, the mysterious drones spotted in northern New Jersey late last year were authorized by the Federal Aviation Administration and were not dispatched by foreign enemies of the U.S., the White House has confirmed on Tuesday, ending months of speculation. After research and study, the drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other purposes. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said during a press briefing Tuesday. Many of those drones were also hobbyists, recreational, and private individuals that enjoy flying drones. In time, it got worse due to curiosity. This was not an enemy. Drone sightings puzzled the nation last year when New Jersey residents reported seeing multiple large drones. Beginning in mid-November, former White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby said in December that the administration had not been able to, and neither have state or local law enforcement authorities, corroborate any of the reported visual sightings. To the contrary, Kirby reported at the time, upon review of available imagery, it appears that many of the reported sightings are actually manned aircraft that are being operated lawfully. There are no reported or confirmed drone sightings in any restricted airspace, which was a lie. Although the Biden administration skirted around the origin of the drones, then President-elect Trump claimed the government knows what's happening. And this is a quote, I believe, from Trump. Look, our military knows where they took off from. If it's a garage, they can go right into that garage. They know where it came from and where it went. And for some reason, they don't want to comment. I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense. Yeah, because they want to fearmonger. They want to fearmonger. They want people confused and frightened. There's Cyberjack Sr. joining us, as well as Stacy. Says that she's late. That's okay. And Jericho says if this doesn't open people's eyes, I don't know what will. And Puck wants the whole story on the drones. I don't know if you're going to get all of it. And New York Patriot says, I don't know why the Biden administration couldn't just come out and say what the drones were. It's really that simple. And that's all they had to do. And that's what I had speculated about at the time when the story first opened up in November. Obviously, that doesn't just happen. They're near military bases. They got to be some kind of test. All anybody had to say was, they're ours. Don't worry about it. We're just testing them. And then people could speculate about why, but at least you would know where they came from instead of thinking that Iran has a drone ship, and they're scouting us out, or China's doing it, or whatever, which was a plausible argument because of the stupid balloon. Thanks, Biden. But that's all anybody had to say. Yeah, they're ours. Don't worry about it. It's a controlled test. We're testing a new type of drone. Anything. And that's what it turned out to be, evidently, according to the current administration, who released that statement to finally put that to rest. You can still speculate about what they were doing, but at least now you know they were ours, which is, again, what I thought the whole time. What are you going to do? But that's, again, that's the thumbnail for today, was the drones. They finally got back to it. Or we finally got a president who's not trying to hold things back, showing us what actual transparency in the executive branch looks like, as opposed to what we had the last 4 years. It was a mess. It was dishonest. It was deceitful. And that was frustrating. It was very frustrating. As we continue on here, this I found very interesting, and this is Oklahoma. This is an Oklahoma news story from CNN talking about schools verifying citizenship. Since when? Oklahoma Board of Education votes to approve proposal requiring parents to prove citizenship when enrolling students. Since when? And I got a story about this. The Oklahoma State Board of Education voted Tuesday to approve a proposal requiring parents to report their immigration or citizenship status when enrolling their children in school. Funny how suddenly you want to do that. The board discussed the proposal for about 20 minutes before approving it, and other proposals in a 6-0 vote. The proposal still needs to be approved by the legislator and governor to take effect. The board is made up of the superintendent of public instruction, Ryan Walters, 5 members appointed by the governor to 4-year terms. Walters opened the meeting by criticizing the media's lies and gaslighting on the issue, and said the goal of the rule was to gather data on its student body. Our rule around illegal immigration accounting is simply that. It is to account for how many students of illegal immigrants are in our schools. You already know that. However, education and immigration advocates say they believe the proposal will make immigrant families feel afraid and unwelcome at public schools that are legally required to provide every child education regardless of citizenship status. And I don't understand that. And that is true. That, first of all, you do know. Because if you have a kid who is there illegally, you don't have paperwork for them. I can tell you that I had a nightmare getting my middle child into school because I didn't have his birth certificate. And I've talked about this before. I've mentioned it in older videos talking about my ex and that whole situation. Okay? You're an American citizen without the right paperwork, it will be a nightmare to get your kid enrolled in school, if you can do it. If you're a non-citizen and you got no paperwork, no problem. Okay? My middle child, because he was born in Massachusetts and we were not married, in Massachusetts at that time, I don't know how it is right now, but back then, there is no common law in Massachusetts. So the father, where it says father, they blank the whole thing out. You can't write anything on that on the birth certificate. It's crossed out. They scribble it out, they blank it out with a magic mark or whatever. Only the mother's name goes on. So when custody was reversed in 2007 and I got the kids from her, she refused to give me their paperwork. Court never enforced it, but I didn't have paperwork for them. I couldn't get the birth certificate for either of the kids. So if I moved and I had to enroll him anywhere or prove who he was, I couldn't do it because since I wasn't on the birth certificate, I couldn't obtain a copy of it. I couldn't obtain a copy of it from Massachusetts. They won't give it to you unless your name's on it. And they won't give it to the child unless the child is 18. Again, at least that was the rule then. I don't know how it is in Massachusetts now. So trying to enroll them in school was a nightmare. They didn't want copies. They didn't want to transfer from the other school. They wanted to see the original. In sharp contrast, when I worked for the Juvenile Justice Authority, I had a client, 12-year-old girl, transferred to my facility because she was highly promiscuous. And I was running the facility I was running for the JJA was all females. It wasn't co-ed. They wanted to get her out of a co-ed environment. She had nothing in her book, no paperwork at all. And it turns out the reason she didn't have any paperwork was because she was an illegal alien. Okay, that was in the system. I don't know what game the JJA commissioner was playing, but they had her in the system while her parents, I guess, were up the river. I don't know what the hell was going on. They were arrested, and she was in JJA custody. So I had her, and I'm supposed to enroll her in school. And I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to do that? And they were like, oh, don't worry about it. The school will let you do it. Yeah, they sure as hell did. They sure as hell did. I told them I don't think she has legal status, and I have no birth certificate, no social security number, nothing. I don't even have an insurance card. And they were like, no problem. We'll just make it up. Jesus Christ. You know, after all I had been through with my kids and the birth certificate and the social security card, because you need other forms of ID to get the social security card. You can't just go get one. And they let her just waltz in. Junior high school, obviously. And Bob is here from the UK. He says it's wet and windy. And Puck says bloody hell. No kidding. No kidding. And New York Patriot said you shouldn't be able to be here illegally, put your kid in public school when it's funded by legal citizens who pay taxes. Thank you. Especially since a large chunk of that comes out of people's property taxes, whether they have kids in school or not. I've complained about that many times. I think somewhere between 80 to 85% of what we pay in property taxes goes to public schools in Georgia. But we don't have a kid in public school, and we wouldn't dare put a kid in public school. We wouldn't do it. But we get taxed for it big time. It's insane how much money they take, and they always want more. It doesn't make any sense. And Brian made a donation to the channel. Thank you, Brian. Much appreciated. Always, we'll take all the help we can get to look after our shelter cats. So thank you again. Meantime, the public schools continue to fail everybody because it's a money pit and they do a terrible job. They're even if a teacher wanted to teach kids to do the right thing, they can't do it because their hands are tied by the system. Associated Press article, U.S. children fall further behind in reading and make little improvement in math on national exams. No kidding. It's been that way for how many decades now? Even when I was in school in the 80s, this was going on. America's children have continued to lose ground on reading skills in the wake of the C virus pandemic and have made little improvement in math, according to the latest results of an exam known as the nation's report card. Don't blame the pandemic. Don't blame the pandemic. This has been going on for decades. And every year it's a little worse, a little worse, a little worse until we've gotten to where we are now. The findings are yet another setback for U.S. schools and reflect the myriad challenges that have upended education, from pandemic school closures to youth mental health crises and high rates of chronic absenteeism. Yeah, they don't go to the school because they know they don't have to now. The pandemic taught these kids what the rest of us already knew, that it doesn't matter if they're there or not. So why go? The national exam results also show growing inequality. Really, while the highest performing students have started to regain lost ground, lower performing students are falling further behind. Well, if they're low performing, they don't care. So what do you expect from them? To have a 180 turnaround and suddenly want to do the job? Given every 2 years to a sample of American children, the National Assessment of Educational Progress is considered one of the best gauges of the academic progress of the United States school system. The most recent exam was administered in early 2024 in every state, testing 4th and 8th grade students on math and reading. Two things they can't do. Two things they can't do. It's one of my biggest complaints working for the JJA. Bob says most prime ministers went to public school, mainly Eton. Oh yeah, Eton. Oh, yeah. A little "Are you being served?" humor there, if you get the Mr. Granger Eton joke. Jimmy says, yes, DJL collects data. I refuse to buy one of those. I don't know enough about electronics. Oh, he's talking to someone else there. Sorry. Side conversation. Puck says education is for the elites. You serfs don't need that to dig ditches or pump gas. No, you don't. Real education, if you can afford it, unless you're going to do it yourself, which goes back to home. Even someone who doesn't know what they're doing can educate their kid if they're really involved with what their child is doing. They just choose not to. It's easier to throw it on public schools and forget it. Turn your child into a roommate. I say it all the time. People just have kids. They don't really care about them. A lot of them don't. There are some who do, but many don't. The school's a babysitter, raises the kids for them. Between the television, the phone, and public school, you never even have to see your kid anymore. Throw them out in the morning. Maybe they'll go to school, maybe not. They'll show up sometime in the afternoon, throw something in the microwave while you're doing whatever you're doing. You'll never even see them. Oh, but I love my kids. You can't tell me. Sure. It's an act. Jericho says they'd rather teach their kids than have them sit in a room for 8 to 10 hours. Yeah. And do what? And do what? Less than I was doing. Less than I was doing. Which is why I stopped going. That's why I dropped out. It's why I used to ditch school. Now this ties in a little bit because I brought it up. It's a local article. With the whole property taxes thing, and I don't understand how they could do this. And this is WSB Atlanta article coming up. Georgians voted to limit property taxes on homes, and many school districts are opting out. I don't understand how they can do that. So Georgians voted to limit how much of a home's increasing value can be taxed. city school system would have lost more than $4 million in tax revenue over the previous 6 years if assessed values have been limited to the rate of inflation. School district revenues will decrease significantly over time to Albertus. Some state lawmakers are threatening to introduce legislation to force their local governments to comply if they use the escape hatch the law provided, and taxpayers are appearing to object at some of the required public hearings before a school district can opt out. So, years, in the last couple of years, especially since the pandemic, the property taxes in Georgia have really jumped. They've gone up quite a bit. It's gone up quite a bit. And there was a vote to cap that. It's like, okay, quit doing this to us. Quit increase, because when the taxes go up, it's really just the school tax that keeps increasing by hundreds of dollars almost every year. Enough for what? Half the time the schools aren't even open. Okay? And now the schools are saying, no, we don't want you to do that, and they're boycotting the cap to force homeowners to continue to have to pay extra to the public schools. I don't agree with that. All people suggest public school in the UK is the same thing as private school in the US. It looks the same, but it is not. It looks the same as private schools in the US, but it really isn't. And public schools in the UK don't necessarily get a good education. And Bob says, I've learned more from public libraries and the internet than I learned at school. And there it is. Bob, different Bob here says, did everyone lose sound or is it just me? I got an orange warning from Restream, so you might have lost sound for a second. And all people wants to know if we saw Tiffany Henyard lost her wig in a city meeting. No, I did not see that. I did not see that. Doesn't surprise me that she wears one, though. And I want to know how they can do that. It says nearly 63% of Georgia voters supported a state constitutional amendment that would limit increases in a home's value for property tax purposes to the broader rate of inflation each year. The measure came after lawmakers filed complaints about rising property tax bills. From 2018 to 2023, the total assessed value of property across Georgia rose 61%. Most governments pocketed increased revenue even as they lowered tax rates, boosting employee pay and other spending. Statewide, so instead of giving it back or doing something useful, they gave themselves raises. Statewide property tax collections rose 44% between 2018 and 2023, which is what I was talking about. And the school department is like, no, we're tapping into that. We want to keep tapping into that. And I'm against that, obviously. I don't think you should have to pay property tax at all. You bought the house. If you don't pay your taxes, you don't own it. If they can take it from you for not paying your yearly tribute, then you don't really own it. And I'm tired of that. I'm tired of it. For a failed system, for a system that doesn't work, for a system that is basically a money pit. And Bob says 6,000 pounds sterling a term at Eton. Oh, is that what you're suggesting? Because it was, is that what you meant, all people, because they have to pay for it instead of it being federally funded? And Joe says, love that Trump signed Lincoln Riley Act and said he's sending 30,000 illegals to Guantanamo. Incredible. And Puck says property taxes are unconstitutional. Yeah, so is income tax. And both of those, if I remember correctly, were created for the purpose of a temporary fund for wartime. But once they got that money, they didn't want to give it back. And then they had more money that they knew what to do with, and they used that money inappropriately on all sorts of pet projects and giving themselves raises and funding things that didn't need funding. They had so much they threw it around, they didn't know what to do. Bob says, I think what you call public schools, we call state schools. You don't have to pay for them. Yeah, there you go. Thank you for the clarification, Bob67. And John suggests income taxes are also unconstitutional. They are extortion, correct. They are extortion. And as Reagan pointed out, you pay more than you realize. I mean, people think, oh, it's just the income tax. You know, I'm only paying 18 to 22% depending upon how much money I make. And no, you're not. Reagan spelled it out very bluntly. When you factor in sales tax, tax on labor, tax on when you go to the gas pump, tax on your utilities that's already included in the cost, tax when you buy or sell anything, the extra money that you pay for items to help to cover some of the tax that's paid by the company that manufactured it. By the time all said and done, you're paying 50 to 60%. And Joe says Lincoln started taxing during Civil War. There was no income tax before 1913. And John says President Lincoln was the first commie. President Lincoln did, he was the first one to do cover-ups. He put a lot of people illegally in jail for protesting without due process, tens of thousands of people in New England, in the New England area. Locked them up without due process so the people wouldn't hear their protests about the Civil War. He also covered up a mass execution of Indians. I think 300 Indians were hung in a mass execution ceremony, and it was reported through the press secretary that it was only 30 because he didn't want the international papers to think ill of the executive branch at wartime. If I remember that story correctly. But enough of that. I mean, yeah, we're taxed literally to death. It kills us. Reagan also said that, and I think this is when he was debating Carter for the presidency in the 70s, that you can only tax people so much. Then he was taking a jab at Carter for all increasing taxes and for various liberal-minded programs or whatever he was doing at the time. You can only sustain that for so long. If you keep just taxing people, eventually you're going to get to a point where there's nothing left. There's nothing left. And then what are you going to do? Joe says taxed on gas, groceries, and clothing. Yeah. There's only so much to go around. If you take everything, eventually it collapses, which is what happened to the Soviet Union. That's why communist and socialist countries eventually fail. Sooner or later, it'll fall apart. The smaller the country is, the longer it can hang on because it has less to do. The bigger the country is, the faster it collapses. It took the Soviet Union a while, though, but man, they ruled with an iron fist. They executed more of their own people than how many died during World War II. But with that, we are at the top of the hour, so I will go ahead and start signing off. So again, you are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk, and you can find the live portion Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube on Coffee Talk and Prepper University. You can find me on Rumble, and that's Coffee Talk 2 with the number 2. You can find me on X at Coffee Talk Chat. You can find me on fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta. Special thanks to Brian today for making a donation to the channel. Very much appreciated. So again, thank you everybody else for joining us here today. As always, hope you got something out of the conversation, and we will